My name is Will McCollum. I am an archaeologist. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Chicago, but I've been back in Birmingham the past couple of years conducting my fieldwork here at Red Mountain Park. I have been working at a site called Smythe, and Smythe was a mining camp, so it was where workers and their families lived, who lived in what is now Red Mountain Park in the late 19th, early 20th century. So I excavated around the houses and then surveyed around the area that used to be where the company store was and where also a dump site was. So we collected a lot of material, bottles and ceramic, just on the surface over in that area, and then excavated for a few months around the households to get a better sense of what the workers and miners were up to in their daily lives. The company store was the only place for buying, goods in the mining camp, and that's the same for most company towns and mining camps around the country at the time. Is people were paid in scrip, which was company currency that could only be redeemed at the company store. So the company store, the goods, the wares in the company store were overpriced and inflated compared to grocery stores in town because the workers and their families who lived at Smythe were compelled, they were forced to use their company scrip at the company store, so they had no other option. But also we found through survey indications that the company store was also a place for socializing. It was sort of one of the only real public areas in Smythe. All the structures are domestic structures, houses. They were drinking at the company store. We found lots of broken whiskey bottles, a lot of soda bottles. They were probably just using it as a place to hang out. And the only two structures that weren't houses were the company store and probably an administrative kind of building for paying out workers, and then also keeping track of hours and logistical sort of data and logistical information. The way that archaeology goes typically is you start a project by surveying, and surveying is a way of identifying areas of interest. So through survey, which is really just walking around and inputting points in a GPS unit and recording data and observations, you get a better sense of what areas might be areas of interest to return to and actually study more closely and take your time sort of working around that area. So way back in 2020, I surveyed the whole park and sort of walked around trying to get a sense of where sites might be, where there might be material culture or other kind of interesting archaeological data to be recovered. And through that process of survey, we identified this area as the dump, which is right behind the company store, sort of on the edges of what would have been fields. So it was a place for throwing trash. Trash sites are great for recovering artifacts, and they were just sitting right on the surface. So through surveying in 2020, we identified it, and then in 2023 we came back and recovered the material. And right now we're working in the lab, analyzing the data, analyzing the artifacts. When you're in the field, you don't work as hard at sort of what's called sourcing or dating, trying to identify the source for an artifact. But we found a lot of bottles, especially that had embossed maker's marks or brands labeled on the bottles. So in the lab, we're able to look at these more closely and just basically do basic searches online, look through message boards of kind of collector communities and try and come up with the dates and sources, the locations for the brands, especially where the bottles were made and where the bottling companies were. And those were all pretty much regional, so most of them were Birmingham bottling companies, and there were also some from Georgia, some from Mississippi, but it is telling us something about the regional distribution and sort of supply chain and the way that these networks are very regional. Most noteworthy fact really about the site is that it was majority black. And this is part of my interest in the site itself, is that it's very uncommon to have a black industrial camp. So that's a really significant historical fact in giving context to Smythe. But I actually spent most of my time excavating at Smythe around the households, and something that struck me is how many sort of artifacts we found that spoke to them living, lives outside of their conditions of exploitation. So we found pieces of jewelry. So they had cheap jewelry, but beads and a pendant for a necklace and a cabochon, a turquoise cabochon for a ring. And these are little emblems, little sort of symbols of the fact that they had opportunities to wear sort of subtle luxury items. Who knows exactly what they were doing? Maybe going to church, but some of these items were a little bit more ostentatious than that. So it's interesting to imagine what they would be going to. These were very poor people, and this was reflected in the quality of ceramic, which was relatively or straightforwardly low quality ceramic. So there wasn't a whole lot of decorated pottery that would have been higher quality. We did find very few fragments of porcelain. We also found milk glass, which would have been more decorative and is technically glass, but it's also classified as ceramic because it was used for the same kinds of things. We found a lot of actually regional pottery, so some sort of folk or vernacular pottery, especially these jugs that were kind of cool with a little handle that would have been kind of crudely made. But then we also found something that was interesting is we found a couple pennies. And a penny might seem like very insignificant. I mean, it's the smallest token of currency. But what is significant about finding pennies is that it speaks to them having access to currency outside of company scrip. So even if it's not much, they at least did have some currency other than scrip, which means they were buying and selling, probably outside of the mining camp as well. What would have been a common position for domestic labor and for women especially is washing clothes. They would have been taking people's clothes to wash them from potentially other sites, other areas. They could have been picking up laundry from people and charging them in sovereign currency rather than company scrip. Even if they're very poor, they were finding ways to engage in activities that spoke to leisure and spoke to recreation. The exploitation, I've used that word a few times, their conditions in the labor structure as kind of the poorest and most exploited worker. That story is complicated by the fact that they did find ways to do regular human things outside the workplace, and I think that's fairly significant. A lot of times archaeologists like to talk about resistance and sort of resisting. I wouldn't frame what I found as examples of resistance in the active sort of sense of resistance, but I do frame it as kind of a refusal, but kind of an indifference to the company's domination of their working lives.